All right, so I'm here with Liza Earle-Centers, who is the director of Lifespan Spiritual Exploration. Thanks, Liza, for agreeing to interview with me. First, what congregation do you serve?
I work at the Unitarian Church of Montpelier, Vermont.
Montpelier, Vermont. And how long have you been serving as in the capacity that you're in?
This is my 6th year that I'm starting with the church. My first 2 years were under the title Acting Director of Religious Education. So we had a 2-year envisioning process where we got a lot of input from the congregation of where the religious education program had been, where it currently was, and where they wanted to see it go. And during that process, the name changed from religious education to Lifespan Spiritual Exploration. People felt like RE had a connotation in our church of just children and youth, and they really wanted people to think of it as a lifespan program. And spiritual exploration just seemed a little more expressive of the freedom we wanted in the spiritual journeying rather than teaching people specific religious dogma.
Okay.
It's a mouthful though.
Yeah. And so from this moment on, we're going to call it LSE, right?
Yes, Lifespan Spiritual Exploration. Yeah.
Great. So pre-COVID, because I know that you've been here for 6 years, and we've been almost 2 years now. Well, I would say maybe a year and a half, a little bit more than that, in COVID. But pre-COVID, how was LSE organized generally?
Generally, I would say that probably about 60 or 70% of the LSE programming happened on Sunday mornings or sometimes into Sunday afternoons, but that was really a huge focus from the little kids in the nursery space while parents were in worship to everyone gathering for worship and the time for all ages as part of RE. And then after the first part of worship, kids and youth would head out to their RE classes for different age levels, 2 or 3 grade age levels. And even the high school youth group and the OWL classes would happen on Sundays. And often adult book discussions would happen after worship in the congregation. And some groups would meet, some small group ministry and things like that would meet during the weeks, weeknights. But most of our programming was organized around Sunday morning.
And currently, has anything shifted?
Yeah, it's almost all online now. We've been doing some in-person activities, sort of trying for once a month outdoor activities, but it sure is tricky with the kids and the youth and some adults growing weary of the Zoom aspect, and others really rejoicing in it. Some people talk about how intimate and close up and personal it feels during a story for all ages to have our faces right there and be able to see the objects that we're talking about instead of being way back in the pews where some of the adults can't see things. And it's very accessible, right? You can tune into Zoom even if you're not feeling well or the roads are bad, but it's not accessible if you don't have good Wi-Fi, or if you have only one device in the household. So there's a lot of interesting questions around accessibility and equity. In general, though, most kids and youth and adults are feeling some Zoom fatigue, so that's real too. They want connection, And yet the in-person sometimes is tricky, safety-wise and logistics. And the Zoom sometimes is just not connective enough.
Yeah.
Also just families in particular, but certain adults too are just overwhelmed, right? Their bandwidth for what they're able to take in, even if they might want to participate in a program, just getting people to open up the email newsletter that I send out is really hard. And families are wanting a little bit of like less is more, to not feel burdened with having to attend different things.
Yeah. So your elevator speech about the general philosophy, the purpose of LSE, and a couple of sentences. What pre-COVID, what would you say that would be if someone asked, in passing, like, what's your philosophy for LSE?
Yeah. Well, I heard one person recently say that LSE is the applied theology of our faith. It's our faith put into action. And that really does speak to the vision that the congregation itself created for our program, which talks about providing opportunities for us to live our values. So we've been, especially during COVID, actually partnering with a lot of local organizations to help get them volunteer power. We just sent a group of 14 people of all ages to a local farm to help glean for the local food shelves. We've done some tree planting partnerships and the river cleanups. So that aspect of service is our prayer as Unitarian Universalists. So creating service opportunities, celebrating rites of passage along the lifespan. So whether it's a child dedication ceremony or a bridging ceremony for the high school seniors, or the coming of age ceremony or new members for the adults, really marking and celebrating as a community what that means for us on our spiritual journeys. And I think fundamentally giving people a space wherever they're at on their lifespan to reflect about the experiences happening in their life and those deeper questions, giving them a space to bubble to the surface for them as individuals, and to witness that bubbling and reflection among our peers and learn from each other's wisdom. I think that's at the heart of what our vision is.
Yeah, so it doesn't seem like too much has changed about the general philosophy and purpose, but the how that is done has changed. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I guess a core part also would be nudging people out of their comfort zones a little bit to learn about, how to just increasingly widen the circle and include more and more people into our faith. And with the killing of George Floyd, there definitely was a huge increase in hunger and sort of sense of accountability around our anti-racism work, which we have been doing for 4 or 5 years. And it felt good that it wasn't like suddenly we felt obligated to do it, but it was just nice to have some new folks motivate to do the work themselves.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, and speaking of new folks, prior to the COVID, how were instructors recruited, trained, supported prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, well, when I started, I definitely inherited a nice small group of RE at the time volunteers who had grown close bonds with each other. There was a sort of sense of family among them, and they had teams, the different age groups. The volunteers for different age groups sort of knew each other over the years, and each year some new folks would fold in and the veterans would really sort of mentor the newer volunteers. And I was simply a support for those different groups. And for finding new folks, it would just come from relationships, people during coffee hour who presented as, oh, I'm a retired teacher, but I'd love to help out with the kids sometimes. Or just, yeah, people on the committee, the minister and I would all sort of brainstorm, oh, this person would be a great mentor for coming of age. It just happened pretty naturally. And during COVID, how that has shifted. Well, in the beginning, a lot of people just needed to step out of any volunteer role, right? We all just needed to pare down to the basics, and so a lot fell on staff shoulders to keep programs going, and that's just a model where you can't offer as much because I can't lead every program area. So there were certain groups that just didn't have programming happening even online. For the middle school fell through last year. We didn't have anything for them. And what's hard is in our congregation, a lot of our volunteers are retired folks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones who have more time and more energy in their life to take on a responsibility rather than the younger folks who are still working or have kids at home still. And the Zoom element has really been a wall for a lot of people in that age group. Even if there's really not much to hosting on Zoom, it's just the muting and unmuting and how to help someone if their Wi-Fi is bad. And so they always want me there as like the Zoom host. So that has been tricky to find people. And in general, people are saying yes to showing up and assisting, but just the headspace that we're all in, very few people want to take a leadership role.
Yeah.
So that's been real hard. They're happy to be a set of helping hands for a finite time commitment. And so it's just working with that. I'm just trying to get more programming onto the lay leaders. So it's really a shared ministry and not so much on the staff, but it's a tricky transition process.
Yeah. So you've been mentioning throughout, certain challenges that you faced during the pandemic. And even before the pandemic, there were challenges there. What particular challenges of doing LSC do you see in this at the Unitarian Church of Montpelier, and how has the pandemic changed some of those challenges, if it changed them at all?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you and your colleagues are familiar with the paper that was written by Kim Sweeney, maybe 5 years ago now, The Death of Sunday School, and talking about just how the model has so shifted in the last 40 years from when families had often like one adult at home who was not working outside of the household and could really play a strong leadership role in church and volunteering for Sunday school. And there weren't a ton of activities that kids were participating in. So Sunday morning church, that was the main thing. And your family went every single Sunday, and you knew every other family and person in the congregation. And our church was famous for these big plays that the kids program would put on. The stage in our fellowship hall was for actual plays.
Oh,
and
wow.
it would be month-long, many months working up to them. And when I started, it was just kids, oh, we'd love to come, but we have soccer, or they have symphony practice, or these kids in central Vermont and around the country are just really busy. They're engaged in so many different programs. And so you're lucky if you have a kid who comes once or twice in a month. And so you can't have programs that really depend on a kid being there for every single Sunday that build. They have to sort of be standalone, that someone can get a lot out of it, even if they just come once every 6 weeks. So you can't attempt to play, right? You can't attempt those kind of things. So that is a challenge. During the time of the pandemic, when there was nothing going on, in some ways that was an advantage, because if we did offer programming, families were like, oh yes, something to do. We want to go to that, even if it's on Zoom. But now the challenge, my most recent in-person event, we didn't have many families sign up for. And I think it's that the COVID numbers, the Delta variant, the numbers are going up. And so even though a program's outdoors, they're just not wanting to take that risk yet. So that's a newer challenge right now. And I worry most of all of it just becoming something that is not part of families' rhythms anymore. You know, with
Yeah.
with adults, they might be taking a pause from church right now, but as soon as we're like fully back in the swing of things or partially back, they'll be right on board. But if you have a seventh grader who hasn't been to church for 2 years, it's just no longer a part of their memory or their traditions as much. So we'll have some rebuilding to do. It's
Yeah.
just the nature of it. Yeah, we've had a positive response from some care packages that we've done. Our care network of adults has helped deliver care packages that my committee volunteers and I have put together, and we just leave them on the door. So even if they haven't been showing up for a single thing during this pandemic time, they know that we're still thinking of them and we're here for them.
Okay. Thank you. And a few more questions, just a few more questions. Mostly about what do you wish ministers, now you're talking to a bunch of aspiring ministers and candidates even in our class. But what do you wish ministers understood about religious education or faith formation and/or faith formation?
Mm. Well, let's see. I think that our minister and I have a great relationship, and she's been so supportive of my programming and my instincts and my intuition from the start. And I think sometimes I hear colleagues say that they don't have that trust or respect from their supervisors, their ministers. So I want to lift up that that's been huge, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that I love this really concrete, but I love our every 2 week one-on-one check-in where I can really go deep into the elements of the program that I'm wrestling with or excited about. And just a nice balance of being willing to answer some nitty gritty questions or pull me out to the big picture. But I feel like she really follows my lead on what I need for support, and that's huge. And also just appreciation, just regularly lifting up the things that you see your colleague as the DRE doing, and that can go a really long way to
Yeah.
lift them up.
And so, and according to what you just said, that support and check-ins and lifting up and is very supportive, and your minister has been that for you. And I'm sure that with all these challenges and going through these times, just to have that support is helpful. It may not solve all the
Yeah.
issues and everything, but and that's a lesson that as future ministers, I think we can take in, that to if you're not heavily involved, make sure that this program, which is an essential part of church life and of spiritual development, is supported and acknowledged and highlighted, rather than, oh,
Yeah.
that's something over there and we're over here. So
Yes, yes. I love that you mentioned the highlighting. And again, I think our minister does a wonderful job of weaving into worship whenever possible references to the great ministry that's happening in lifespan spiritual exploration. I mean, she started her first sermon back from sabbatical was reading the list um, of wishes that all the children brainstormed with me before she went on sabbatical. Like, what a way to honor and center that LSE program area, to highlight that. And so Yep, I think even just planning whole worship services to lift up a program area, like we had an entire worship service to celebrate the Beloved Conversations
Hmm.
adult spiritual exploration program that we had people participate in, or an entire service for the coming of age program, things like that, to really honor it. Because definitely what the minister honors, the congregation tends to respect and honor as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And also just showing up, occasionally taking Reverend Joan would take a Sunday off to be with the kids programming on Sunday morning, and someone else was in the pulpit so that she could be with the kids, or stopping into youth group for a pizza party, or just physically joining the programs once in a while can be really supportive feeling.
Yeah. Wonderful. And last question. This is an open-ended question. What hasn't been asked that you would like to share?
Hmm.
And to give you some context, like I said before, most of the people in the class, and particularly, I don't think everyone in the class is going to, see this or whatnot. But what would you impart on me as an inspiring minister who is all about faith
Right.
formation, and won't I'm not going into becoming a director of religious education. Maybe in my former life I was, because I really do love, this part of the church, and that's where I kind of started. Really, my start was a religious education instructor, really. And that's how I found out that I was a minister. So I was like, oh,
That's
wait a
great.
minute. So, like, anything that you like, any blessings, well wishes, any type of like advice and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think for me personally, it's an easy job to love with my whole heart. And that's a blessing and a curse, because I can easily pour myself so into it that I can work 50, 55 hours in a week. And that's
Mm.
just not sustainable. Right. And I think being a minister can be a similar challenge. So I really, I think if all of you can strive to be a model yourself of a healthy balance of work and personal life, that helps set an entire tone for a staff to be able to do that, and not just to tell them to take a day or two off a week, but to really model that yourself, is huge. And it creates a culture of permission to really do that. And finding a balance with your DRE colleagues of letting them run with an idea that's giving them fuel and passion, but also helping them simplify and keep things sustainable. Finding that balance with them, I think would be a big piece of advice
Without
that I would have for all.
micromanaging, right?
Yes, yes. Not micromanaging, but sometimes it is helpful to say, wow, that's a great idea. And it sounds like a really huge project. I wonder how we could share these tasks out so it's not all on your shoulders. That can be really helpful.
Great. Well, I do appreciate, this half an hour of chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to, supporting you even more, and some of the activities that I've already been a part of has been such a joy, especially seeing the interaction, multi-generational interactions, being a joy to the older ones and to the younger ones, um, either worshiping or learning or developing together. I think it's been a wonderful program to witness, and to take forward with me this experience of Liza Earle-Centers, the Director of Lifespan Spiritual Exploration for the Unitarian Church of Montpelier. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Verdis. Thank you, everyone.